Sage Rosenfels, Brent Blum. Heard and viewed exclusively across the world, only on Iowa Everywhere.
And a happy Wednesday, November 30th. This is the Rosenblum podcast. Back with you. Sage Rosenfels off a trip from the West Coast in Portland. Saw you're out there watching the Cyclones play in the Phil Knight Invitational. Did you meet Bill Walton? First question.
I did not beat Bill Walton or Phil Knight.
You did not? No, that was my second question.
Though I was very close to them, actually. Bill was doing his announcing not too far away. And then So let me tell the big story. I went to Los Angeles to see my son first weekend of the Thanksgiving 10 days, basically, and then flew up on Tuesday where my sister lives in Portland for sort of a Rosenfels get-together.
Gotcha.
Pretty much everybody flew in for it. And so we had a great time. It's a great weekend. Portland's a beautiful city, especially this time of year. Of course, gray and rainy, but we had a couple sunny days as well. Well, just so happens I'm there, and I get a text from our great Chris Williams.
Of course.
Said, hey, I hear you're in Portland. I'm up here calling games for this Phil Knight thing. I'm like, I have no idea there's a basketball tournament going.
Oh, so you had no idea there was a connection?
No idea this basketball game.
I thought you were a planner, Sage.
Yeah. So anyway, so I ended up getting tickets to the semifinal game. I'm trying to think. Friday night game. A whole bunch of us went. Of course, there's about 2,500 people probably in this fairly big arena, probably 12 or 14,000 or 15,000, old NBA arena next door to the Moda Center, which is where the Trailblazers play now. And went to this game, and I bought nice seats. It was great behind the basket and close to the team. And my sister's a disability, so it was nice to sort of be down the floor and have us all see. And I knew the place was not going to be full. These holiday things are always sort of more for TV than anything. And so the second night, I bought the cheapest tickets in the house. And we walked, it's a Sunday night.
Sunday
so
night.
Then we walked down, of course, and we're sitting in like the 8th row. It's me, my girlfriend, my brother-in-law. We're just sitting there, the three of us, watching this game in the 8th row. And their warm-ups are going on, and there's nobody there. There's 500 people there, maybe 1,000. There's nobody there. And there's no one on the floor. And I'm like, there's like two guys sitting there on the floor or whatever, a couple, I guess. And I was like, I said, you know what? I said to my girlfriend, you know what's stopping us from going onto the floor? Courage. Courage is the only thing that's going to prevent us from going down there. And so her and my brother-in-law are like, we're good here. And I'm like, I'm not. If I can sit on the floor, it's a different feel. It's a different thing. Be on the sideline of a football game and on the floor of a NBA basketball game or a college basketball game, especially a college basketball game. There's going to be like 2 Sweet 16 teams, 2 great coaches, intense coaches. So I go down there. Well, actually, I asked the sort of the security guard.
Yeah, is there any ushers here?
I said, hey, the three of us, and he had just come from the floor. So he's the one looking up at the stands. I said, hey, the three of us down there on the floor. What do you think? He looks at me and he goes, you guys are the least of my problems. So I go down to the floor, sit down in like the 3rd seat. And I'm sort of thinking like my girlfriend and brother-in-law are going to come sit next to me, right? So I go to the 3rd seat in, and they stay back there. They're not. They're
Where's
like,
the courage?
We'll see how this goes. Where's the courage, right? And so the guy just says to me, goes, if anyone comes here, you just have to leave. And I was like, oh, absolutely. So I'm sitting there by myself. Then this entourage comes by. Phil Knight and the crew come by and sit like right down the way.
You're going south.
Yeah, no, there's 1,200 people now in the stands at this point. Team's warming up. UConn right in front of me. I'm taking videos of all the Nike shoes they're all wearing because this thing is just Nike'd out, of course. All the Iowa State, everyone's wearing Nike. Then an Iowa State father and son who live in Portland, who have traveled to a lot of games, it seems like. They came down and sat in those 2 seats next to me. And then what ended up happening is my girlfriend and brother-in-law came the second half because there was 2 seats to the right of me. So we actually got to see,
Very cool.
Of course, a great basketball game. Really 2 great games. North Carolina, Iowa State, that was so cool. And then obviously the UConn loss. But really, really fun experience. Very random. And just not too often you get to, I don't know what my tickets were, $50 a piece or something to sit on the floor. of a major college basketball game and an NBA stadium, and Phil Knight's in there, and Bill Walton is right around there too. And but I'm sure at home it is a much different experience because it's just weird being in a big stadium.
It is.
With like so few people there.
I would say, I've talked about this before. Actually, the best thing to do as a fan is to go to those Thanksgiving tournaments. It's way better than going to the NCAA tournament or even the Big 12 tournament because nobody goes. And so when you go, I mean, Maui's different, right? Because Maui's a gym of 2,000 people.
Portland's not too hard to get to. Yeah. Southwest flight, to Denver or whatever it ends up being.
But your access at the arena, at the hotel, I mean, you're right next to these guys. That's a great example.
You like that access at the hotel. I do know that. I'm more at the arena, but you're sort of the hotel guy.
No, I've been in Kansas City with Sage, where he's just holding court at the Marriott,
sort of
buying White Russians for everybody, or should I say?
I did do that, didn't I?
People are buying White Russians for Sage. Did anybody recognize you in Portland? Did anybody say, "Hey, that's Sage Rosenfels"?
No, I don't think so. Definitely Phil Knight looked at me as he walked by. He didn't know who I was. I mean, he's dealt with a million athletes over the years. I did say to my brother-in-law, I said, I've never paid him any money, but he paid me $10,000.
So you had a shoe contract?
I had Reebok, Nike, and Under Armour. I believe I was the first Under Armour quarterback.
Really?
They offered me $20,000 to wear Under Armour shoes, and it was the first year they came out with them. And no one's you never want to go with a new shoe company because the shoes are always crap the first year or two.
Right.
But Brady went with them, I think. Also, maybe he went the next year. But I was like, send me some shoes, and they did, and I liked them. So I was like, I can do this for $20,000. I don't really. I thought it was sort of cool. Under Armour at the time was like this growing into the shoe brand, and Nike, the most I ever got was like $10,000 cash and $10,000 in gear. Huh. So you go on this website and you get all this gear. So usually it was like $5,000 or even $3,000 when I was younger. And they don't even do that anymore. I think only a few players actually get paid to wear shoes and to be sponsored by Nike, Adidas, whoever it might be. Obviously, the Sean, a different topic. The Sean Taylor Memorial. He was sponsored by 3 different players at the same time. I'm not sure if you saw that, but we also had that sort of controversy in DC. Dan Snyder, that's a whole other conversation. But the mannequin that he was on had a Nike jersey, Reebok pants, and Adidas shoes. Just like, what is going on here? Like, I mean, how can you screw up something? But anyway, usually about 5 and 5. But yes, the most I think I ever got from Nike was 10 and 10. And believe me, I actually rarely used that. I buy some stuff from that store, the Nike store, but my family members around, they really loved it. They really loved getting bags and shoes. And
did you get taxed? Did you get taxed on that?
Yes. Yes, you do. But you can also, I believe it was like you could write it off too if you could, the portion that you felt were like workout clothes. And then it'd sort of be more of a wash.
Because then it's your, gotcha. That's awesome.
Listen, accounting in the NFL, accounting really life in general, once things start to get really complicated, or it's pretty funny to, try to describe to people.
Yeah, that's an expense.
And everyone has these LLCs out there where they expense all these things. I remember there's a Seinfeld episode. It's like, we'll just write it off. Just write it off. It's like, corporations are doing it all the time. You just write it off. Like, what does that even mean? Just write everything off. So.
I love it. Wow, man, you are just but you're back in Omaha today. So short podcast.
Back in Omaha today, but short podcast. Back in Omaha today. Got about 30 minutes. Up to Minneapolis this weekend. Daughter has a dance competition, or really it's like a dance convention up there. So I'll be.
Do you fly or do you drive?
Oh, drive for sure. Okay. I love the drive in the Midwest. Of course, now if it's icing, snowy, which is probably a 50-50 shot, it's going to be something like that. But I'd rather drive. Then I'm more in control. I have my car.
Fair.
And I can stop in Ames if I want to, on the way up there or something. I've always liked doing that. But I'll drive. And then the following weekend, taking my daughter skiing out in Colorado. Get some fresh powder out there. She does a lot of dance. And so I'm trying to have some other things that she can at least try in her youth and be exposed to. That's a big thing for me as a father, is trying to expose my kids. And she hasn't skied for like 5 years. And then after that, it's gonna be Omaha, and I go to Austin a lot. It's where my girlfriend has a spot down there, so I'll go down there. She comes up here. It works out pretty well. Not a bad place to be in the wintertime. So I'm a traveling man, but it is nice to be home. And I have did some shelves behind me, which
I see that.
Try to make it a little bit nicer.
Do you claim the Washington Commanders, or are you always going to be a Redskin?
I
see your Redskins helmet.
The Washington racial slurs. Yeah. So the racial slur helmet is actually, it's from the throwback season. So
I
this is
like
my
that.
second year there. It was
Okay.
like their 50th anniversary. I
So
think.
are these game used helmets?
This is a game used helmet. Yeah,
Nice.
This helmet was actually used in Osaka, Japan, of all places. I started the first ever preseason game there. Or I started a preseason game over in Osaka when Steve Spurrier was the head coach. And so I had that for a short amount of time. Yeah, the journeyman back in the day.
Who are your I'm trying to think. So that'd been Washington, what, 2001, 2002. Who were your receivers?
2001 was Rod Gardner. He was a first-round pick in my class. Fred Smoot was the second-round pick, and he ended up being a really good player too.
Yep, Mississippi State.
Rod didn't have a great career, specimen of a receiver. And then Michael Westbrook, the old Colorado receiver, who I think he caught the Hail Mary against Michigan.
Yep.
He was the other wide receiver. Man, he was a piece of work.
In a good way, or just a lot?
He was a lot of Lamborghinis. I think he owned 200 suits. He spent all his money. He's one of those guys. It was, and he had a hard time lining up in the right formation and taking coaching.
Too worried about the suits.
That's my Michael Westbrook scouting report for you. And then the next year when Spurrier came in, they signed Warfel. We had Shane Matthews, Patrick Ramsey was a first-round pick. So I was the odd man out. I was just like trying to, and people would always say, you don't play for just one team, you're playing for all of them. So don't get worried about the one team, just play well when you get a chance. And that was like sort of my mindset in training camp, where just like play well and I'll make it somewhere in the NFL.
That's awesome.
And I'm playing my way out of there, which was nice. And but the receivers were Riddell Anthony, Florida guy. I can't think of we had a little fast guy who was also a Florida guy. We also had Chris Doring, who was a Florida wide receiver. Of course, Rod Gardner was on the team. Kevin Lockett, Tyler Lockett's dad, Kansas State family. He was a receiver my first year also. He was our slot guy. That was pretty much the receivers on that squad. And then I went down to Miami at North Turner and Ricky Williams and Chris Chambers.
Chris Chambers. Big
body, 5'11", but with his legs and his arms.
Chris Chambers was only 5'11".
5'11". We actually talked about this.
That's crazy.
The other day, he was 5'11", but he had a 7-foot wingspan.
Yeah,
he had a really weird body, really short torso. No, he would. You'd like walk behind him in the like going in the tunnel, right? And you're on your full on game uniform, and you just look. His legs are just crazy long, and he had this short torso. And then crazy long. I'm sure he could just throw down like 360s and stuff in high school.
He was a great sleeper value pick in my first fantasy football team, I'm pretty sure. Chris Chambers.
So he was a guy that, despite being a very talented wide receiver and very talented athlete, went to Wisconsin because, they were a really good football team, Rose Bowl, type team. Alvarez had that thing going. But they literally never threw the ball at Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. It was Ron Dane. So he was sort of a he probably had 30 catches his senior year or something like that, right? You just didn't catch the football. You learn how to block. And then he got to the NFL, and of course, it's like, oh, this guy is super talented. He just doesn't have any college numbers. So that's like the difference between just like going off of guys' stats and actually watching them play football. But he was a second-round draft pick and had a great career. Yeah. I don't know, he played about 10 years or something. And playing for Kansas City, I think, for a little bit at the end, maybe. But he coaches, he trains guys who are coming out trying to be NFL wide receivers or whatever. He does that down in Florida, and especially between like the season ends and the draft. He's one of those guys training all these guys trying to
good money in that now
get their shots. Yeah. So
worth mentioning, we're sponsored by Circus Sports. Did you know I'm going to Vegas next week with
I did know that. I was
Chris Williams, Chris Hassel, Ken Miller, myself holding it down at the Circa Resort Stadium Swim. It's ready for me. Yeah,
I think I just saw it on Twitter this morning, something flashing through, and it was like that sports pool, and I'm like, it's 24 degrees out here.
It's heated. It's a heated pool. It's only gonna be like 55 in Vegas, but they're not ready for us. That'll be a heck of a time. So appreciate all Circa does for Iowa everywhere, this podcast as well. I'm looking forward to check out the facilities out there. We're gonna be there on stage for the Cyhawk basketball game. So the women play Wednesday night and the men play on Thursday night. We'll have some live specials out in Circa.
Just against UNLV or
No,
or it's a
we're there.
tournament?
We're there just as Iowa guys, but the games are in. Iowa plays Iowa State for the women on
Oh,
Wednesday,
yes,
and then
yes, yes, yes.
for the men on Thursday. So we're
That's
gonna do
right.
some
That's
live
right. Yeah,
programming from Circa.
the big Iowa State.
That's right.
Well, we won it in football. Let's see if we can't
Iowa State
win in basketball. Our basketball are incredible. This is probably as good as we haven't had a run like this. The women have always been consistently good, but they're now literally in the elite category.
Yes.
Preseason, and obviously they have the players. It's interesting to see that program, how far it's come. I go back to high school where a girl from Bettendorf, and I knew some Bettendorf guys, played travel basketball with them, and this girl lived down the street from my buddy, and she went and played basketball at Iowa State, and I think Fennelly had just gotten there, so literally sort of the beginning of that whole run. And of course they were great when I was in school. Really fun games to go to. Stacey Freeze and Angie Welly,
Megan Taylor,
and they've just been consistent overall. But now they're really right up there, and that's they're fun to watch. They're really fun to watch. It's a different type of a game, and it's a really great basketball that they play.
That women's game is on ESPN2. It'll get monster ratings. I mean, that's a top 10 matchup. Caitlin Clark, Ashley Jones. Yeah. It's going to be big time. Looking forward to that. And the men's game will be super competitive. Iowa just keeps rolling with the other Murray. And then Iowa State, of course, with a great win over North Carolina. Looking forward to that. So, speaking of college, I wanted to get your impression, because you've been out of college now for 22 years, Sage, not to age you. But it has changed completely, really, in the last 3 years. I wanted to get your take on what the modern landscape in college athletics looks like, in your opinion, as both a former college player, but also an NFL guy who played professionally. What do you think of the portal? What do you think of NIL? What do you think of coaches making $10 million per year, the monster TV revenues now? Let's start with the portal, because you didn't play until you were, in your third year at Iowa State? You redshirted, and then...
my fourth.
Your fourth year, excuse me.
I mean, my first year redshirted, ran the scout team.
Did you ever think...
And I was the backup quarterback for redshirt freshman, redshirt sophomore year.
Okay. So would you ever have thought of transferring? Because you've already seen Alex Padilla, the backup Iowa quarterback, transfers this week. Iowa State's had several players transfer out. This is now a possibility for guys, not only for NIL greener pastures, which is some of it, but I think more than anything, it's playing time and going somewhere else. What's your impression of the legislation and the guidelines now?
Well, so for my comparison, I never really thought about transferring, because I always knew I had a long ways to go to develop. And I was a very raw athlete in high school. I was a 4 or 5 sport athlete. Football was not. I didn't go to a lot of camps. I was really learning. And so I knew I was going to have to play the long game. Also, transferring to another Division I school wasn't really a possibility, because I didn't want to sit out a year anyway just to be another school. I mean, if I wasn't playing at Iowa State and we were pretty bad, I thought it wasn't like people were looking for the backup quarterback at a school that's pretty bad to come to their school and be the starter.
Fair. So
otherwise it'd be go down a level, and I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to go play at Northern Iowa or something. To be honest with you, if I left Iowa State, it'd probably just to go be a regular student somewhere and just be done with football altogether and just be like, screw it, or go try to play basketball somewhere. That was sort of my passion in high school, is I just loved basketball. Having said that, the rules are different now, of course. You can change without saying out. You can get paid by other schools. I think what's interesting is both of those two things individually have their strengths and weaknesses. The ability to transfer to another school, just like coaches do, seems fair, because coaches do it all the time.
Sure.
Doesn't even matter if it's a school in your conference. You can just change schools. So the contracts are sort of one way, per se, it seems like to me. Players are then sort of locked in no matter how bad the team is, or how bad the coaching staff is, or how bad the experience is on campus. Maybe they just realize this is the worst school for me, which happens to a lot of people's kids who aren't playing sports in college. They want to go somewhere else and they sort of can't.
You lose
which sort of stunk in the old days. Now you can, so that seems fair. Also, adding money to it, though, which I also think is fair separately, because I do think since coaches are making that much money and the schools are building these things and creating all these other jobs, and there's t-shirt companies and all these things that are really profiting off of the labor, the skilled labor of these 18 plus year olds. I think it's fair that they get paid in some way. The combination of all of it is extremely scary. Unless you're Ohio State or one of those schools who truly in Texas, who
they have unlimited,
unlimited amount. So, but what's interesting is it hasn't always worked yet. It didn't work at Texas A&M. They paid the coach an unbelievable amount of money, and they obviously pay all these players a lot of money. It seems like there's all these guarantees or whatever, and they weren't that successful this year. In the past, the Blue Bloods have always won more games. So how's that going to change? Schools like Iowa State were always development schools, really. We get some athletes, but there was a lot of development into a quality college football player that the NFL wasn't a part of the equation. So how does that change?
Yeah.
Right? Does that's pretty much stay the same? Like, does that the school like Iowa State or just wherever you were in the pecking order, are you still sort of in that same pecking order? But also on top of it, are there certain schools that have a crazy amount of money who haven't been great football schools and have that brand that say, hey, if we can sort of buy our way into the
SMU example.
Phil Knight basically did that at Oregon,
yes,
roundabout
in a different way. Yep.
Right. Otherwise, they weren't, a blue blood or a huge brand as much as they are now. And then even for them, it hasn't bought them crazy successful football consistently, but they are usually pretty good. They've got all the facilities and all the things. So yeah, it's really interesting why a kid goes to a school and why a kid decides to stay and or leave. Now, if it were up to me, there's short-term money in life and then there's long-term money in life. Short-term money is paying the bills, going to do work to pay the bills. Long-term money is going to do work that you're learning so much about something really important to you that in the future, you're going to make a lot of money because of it.
Sure.
So how I would look at, if I was a player, and a team came to any college team, and they said, hey, we're going to give you $100,000 or $50,000 or $1 million to come to our school. And we're going to run this offense or defense or special teams, all right, that helps us win games. All right, there's that. If someone else came to me and said, hey, we can't really offer you much money, we can offer you $10,000 or whatever, but what we can do is offer you 4 to 5 years of NFL development. And we're going to watch the Dolphins or Kirk Cousins or these NFL quarterbacks, how do they learn football? So when I leave Iowa State, that I can immediately be on one of these teams that uses that language and those details and that footwork, and I have a chance to make the team whether I'm drafted or undrafted, and I could make millions and millions and millions of dollars and actually set up my entire family and have a 4-year head start. That to me sounds appealing
interesting
to me. That to me sounds like, you know what, they may not have the money, but they're developing me to be, which is what college is for anyway. College isn't to go to where you make your money. College is to go to you develop yourself to really make your money.
Really interesting.
Engineering students, right? I mean, take an Iowa State engineering student and say, hey, you're smart engineering kid. We're going to have you do this job. You make a little money over the course of college, but it's not going to really help you in that.
Be a CEO someday. Yeah.
CEO of some big engineering company. But if I said, hey, you're not going to make any money, but you're going to work on these projects around Iowa that are building bridges and all these things. And now you start building skyscrapers in Des Moines. Now you're starting to go, okay, I can see that progress to where I now know how to do that skill, even though I'm just doing it for free. That to me seems long-term better for my career, my future.
That's an interesting point. The question is, do 17-year-olds, do they have that ability to think through that? As they're making these decisions. I think some do. You would be, because I'm in this world now.
I don't know how much it's sold to them. I don't know how much it's sold to. I mean, I think Saban sells it to them. You're going to get an NFL coach in here. You're going to get an NFL coach. He hires NFL coaches. He hires, right? I mean, Sarkisian was there, and he had been in the NFL. So he tries to get NFL. He's, of course, was an NFL coach and his NFL style coaching.
Sure.
So I think he tries to do that which does help him get the best players.
So that could be actually a way to differentiate if you're, let's say, a program doesn't have monster resources. But if you could get the NFL influence, maybe you can then sell that to your guys of, hey, we are an NFL type program. This is in long term, right? NFL money or NBA money is going to be way, way more than anything you can get at NIL in college.
Yeah. Well, and imagine, basketball is different than football, but if, I think it helped Fred Hoiberg, his NFL knowledge of the game.
NBA, right.
Or NBA, even though he had never recruited and done these other things, but he knew how to win NBA basketball games, and these are the best players in the world.
And look how many guys he got in the NBA now.
That's
Cyclists,
right? Yeah. So there was something to that with him. It's like, hey, there's just something different, because in the NFL it is all football all the time. There's no class. There's no off-season rules really, right? There's summer. There's also just the knowledge compounds on itself, right? So the coaches that were coached 25 years ago, who coached for 30 years, they pass down that knowledge to younger coaches, and then they over time already have that knowledge, but then they're building upon it by learning from other people. And the knowledge is because it's all football all the time.
Yeah.
There's just not all these other things. There's nothing else. And that just changes the dynamic completely of the complexity of the NFL game. When I got the NFL, God bless Dan McCarney. And God bless Steve Loney. I didn't know jack shit about football. I didn't. I know some like basic stuff, but really like the details of fronts and protections. We made protections really easy. And then you get the NFL, and they're like, oh, the protections. Yeah, because if the quarterback doesn't know that a guy is free, or a lineman doesn't know that some linebacker or whatever, it literally can end your season when the quarterback gets hurt, or you have a sack fumble at the wrong time. So you're always thinking worst possible scenario. What happens if? And I think in college, there's just not enough time to do that. Right? Just not enough time with the players to go through all of those details, and that's a big challenge for college football.
Yeah, I mean, you just throw in recruiting is a huge part of a coach's time and efforts.
Huge.
And you just take that out in the NFL, right? And you're almost dedicated completely to strategy and mechanics and.
It's all strategy. Yeah. I mean, does Mike McDaniel look like he played high-level football?
No, he does not.
Right? No, Mike McDaniel is a nerd.
Yeah.
He is. My girlfriend talks about she's a nerd. She's super smart, right?
Raising my hand.
Super curious.
Yeah.
You're a nerd,
Yeah.
100%,
Yeah.
right? It's not about there's a certain time and element for like you put your will on the other person. You're tougher than them, or you're just going to battle harder. But in the NFL, everyone's battling for millions and tens of millions of dollars are on the line. So everyone is really going pretty damn full throttle. It's the strategy that really helps separate them. Of course, having a few extra great players or a quarterback, but the strategy is because you just have so much time to work on. And players aren't there for 3 or 4 years. They're there for 10 or 15.
Yeah, you're just
think about how much football Tom Brady knows.
Right.
Drew Brees would talk about just getting an edge all the time. That was like, I worked out with him a couple of times, and his trainer was this way. It was like, whatever you're doing every day, a little edge. What's a little edge? What's a little bit more, a little bit here, a little bit there, every day, a little bit edge on everyone else. Just a little bit edge. I'll always be getting the edge. And that builds up over time. And you just can't do it in 3 or 4 years in college, but you can do it in 15. And then as you're a young wide receiver, you got to show up and you got to try to learn as much as what Drew Brees knows in year 15. Right. And also they're giving you sorts of knowledge. And so you're just going to quickly
pick it up,
get a lot better and learn so much more. And every single college player that plays in the NFL after the rookie year would be like, man, I wish I would have known all this stuff when I'm back to college. I did it when I went to Iowa State, and I was like, man, I wish I would have known all this stuff when I went back to high school. I had no idea what I was doing. I was just like reading the defensive end on the veer and like bootlegging out and just, running for my life. Right. It's the least detailed. The worst is probably like Pop Warner. No offense to all the dads out there, but that's, you usually don't know that much about football if you're coaching Pop Warner, but the highest level of knowledge, I compare it to like brain surgery. All right. There's all
Sure.
different levels of healthcare out there, right? You've got basically from a nurse or even like a nurse that's like in basically just
Training.
leaving high school,
Yeah.
Right. All the way up to like the top brain surgeon out there. And I have brain surgery. I don't really care about the culture so much. The NFL culture is, do you want to, am I the best there is? Do I have the smartest person? The culture matters in the room. But in the pro game at the highest level, it's how smart is the surgeon and the other people around that surgeon. It's the highest level, right? And I sort of compare that to football. I mean, most college coaches, because of the recruiting and because of all the sort of the way it goes and really exposure a lot of times, you don't get that like brain surgery level. And that's just sort of like that's just sort of the way it goes. That's why these sports feel so different when you watch them on television.
I want to ask you one more thing, but you raise a good point that I'd like to comment on. I believe, for the reasons you just said, Iowa and Iowa State will still be fine, quote unquote, fine in this new NIL world because the opportunity to play is still important. In order to maximize your high end potential, you still have to get on the field. And unless there's scholarship limitations that get erased, which I don't think will happen, being a developmental program is not a bad word. That could actually be used to your advantage. Now,
it's a great word. I mean, I think of it as like Butler basketball. There's something about guys not getting the premier players and actually developing for 4 years and playing a lot for 3 or 4 years. The team ends up being really competitive because guys aren't constantly transferring and going other places. And it's like other schools that have the elite programs almost, they have a harder time because everyone's going to the NBA right away.
Yep.
And it's hard to keep guys together in that culture. For a long time. By the way, the culture is important. It's not the same as brain surgery, but it's extremely important. It's 18 to 22-year-old kids. And
learning
really,
how to be.
It's 16 and 17-year-old kids you're trying to recruit. So how to become an adult and be a responsible person, it's extremely important. But in the NFL, you've already gone through that process. And now it's like, these are men. That's the first thing they teach you is like, these are grown men. These are businessmen up here. We're making business decisions every single day. And it doesn't mean that people aren't amateur or idiots up in that league either, but it's the cream of the crop, and it ends up being, I think, having the best strategy coaching.
I think the one issue in college athletics that they got to figure out one way or another. I'm okay with the transfer situation. The problem is there are no quote unquote contracts, and so I'll call it, it's not fair to him, but I'll call it the Tyrese Hunter situation. It's going to be tough for the Iowa State and the Iowas of the world with the resources they have if Texas and Auburn and A&M are able to pluck your best players every year. Now, you can still make the business decision.
Wild. It's wild for Kansas to literally be like, "Oh, you are hard to play against. We want
We're going to have you. We want you now." And they've done that. They just got Texas Tech's one of Texas Tech's best players. McCullough is now starting for them. The point is,
I do hate this is what I hate about this current situation. I love that kids can transfer, but like this is where it all sort of is going to end up, and this is where it feels not good to me.
Yeah, and I think there's a way to either you put in the one-time transfer. I don't know. I mean, there's something you can tinker with the transfer rule, but
transfer once,
and that's it.
That would be it.
Because the other thing that is happening is there's an equilibrium where, and Iowa State's a good example. You lose Tyrese Hunter, but you get Jaron Holmes from St. Bonaventure, and that's a step up for him.
Yeah, and there's great players in these other conferences.
Absolutely.
Especially in basketball. I mean, there's really good players that you see in the AAC or these other sort of Power 5 schools. They're like, oh, that guy's he's a Big 12 guy. Yep. He's a whatever guy, right? And again, like the cream only can rise to the top so much. I feel like so I think Iowa State can steal from some of these smaller, and I think playing in front of a sold out Hilton Coliseum or a sold out Jack Trice has huge value to these really good players from smaller schools.
Good point.
And I think even that has more value than sometimes the financial aspect of going to a school that may give you a little money, but no one's really going to the games. I think that's where Iowa State does have our crowd and our fans do make a difference in this whole scheme.
And I would say that for Iowa too. And that's a fact. I'm in this world daily. It's a fact that fan support still matters because I mean, they're human beings. They're not just there for the paycheck. Well, are you, last thing for you, then I know you got to run. Are you resentful at all that you couldn't make money when you were in college and some of these?
I wasn't good enough to make money. It's like, we're 4-7 my junior year, and I was just the backup quarterback before that. And, my senior year, we weren't good till the end, and I'm off to the NFL. So it's like I didn't really have an opportunity for that. But there was something nice about a simpler time. When I came in that freshman year, and it was Ben Bruns was my roommate, and Ryan Harklaw and Josh Rank and Reggie Hayward and James Reed. Reggie was actually the class after me. Darren Davis was in my class. But there was this thought, we're going to be together. We're going to be together for like the next 4 years or 4.5. We're going to be together. And that's interesting. That's like family and culture and guys really caring about each other. And I don't know how that is in today's world with social media and with this type of stuff, how you have that connection, or is everyone just sort of out for themselves? Because in the NFL, everyone's out for themselves. Everybody knows it. And you're playing as hard as you can for this team. And as soon as you're a free agent or whatever, you're going to go play as hard as you can for the next team, because that's where there's paychecks there. And that is what is a change in that. But the difference is the NFL has all sorts of rules. There's like no rules right now in college football. The NFL is loaded with salary cap rules. If your owner owns a car dealership, they can't just give you a car. It would count against the salary cap, right? So there's very precise rules up there, and so that actually keeps this whole crazy for-profit thing, tampering. It keeps it reasonable, right? But there's like no rules in college football, and it's scary. It really is. But I tell you what, right now, for 7 years, 6 to 7 years, Campbell's done a great job at Iowa State. We'll see how this NIL stuff affects how he can recruit, because that's one of his specialties, is bringing really, really good players. The fact that we can have, number one defense in the conference, and there's going to be a lot of NFL guys on this team to come to Ames, Iowa. We couldn't do that a long time ago. And that fan support and the stadium and the facilities, all of that has, and Matt's done a great job bringing players to Iowa State. And the basketball doesn't seem to be too phased by it either. They seem to be, they might lose a guy, but they might gain two, and that might be better. Right, losing a great point guard and getting two really, really good, a 3 and a 5, might be even better for the football team from a smaller conference or something. So I think Otzenberger's a great coach, great recruiter. Loved his intensity. That was a fun game to go to the other day. I'm looking forward to watching this Iowa State basketball team this year.
We'll end with that. It's going to be a fun winter in the state, and there's a lot of good basketball, men's and women's side. Drake's got a great program, both men's and women. UNI has been impressive too, so should be fun. Well, Sage. Yeah. Get running, my friend. We'll talk to you next week. Good stuff.
Sounds good.
All right. See ya.